listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome to the 5th session of the Health Promotion Influencer 2011-2012 academic year. Thank you so much for your patience. If you've had to log in and out a little bit this evening, we've had just a little bit of technical difficulty, but thank you for hanging in there with us. As you may or may not know, if you've attended other sessions, the Health Promotion Influencer Series is a new initiative at Villanova that aspires to encourage a common language for learning and understanding critical college student health issues. And our goal is to empower you to positively influence your student Villanova experience and beyond. This evening's session focuses on understanding the LGBTQ student experience. And our sessions are recorded, and you will have access to them after the webinar tonight and in the future. So hello, my name is Stacy Andes. I may have seen some of you in previous webinars. I'm the Director of Health Promotion here at Villanova, and I will be one of 2 moderators for this evening's session. And for those of you who may or may not be familiar with the Office of Health Promotion, let me just mention a few words. We're essentially the health education and outreach arm at Villanova, and we educate and empower students to balance the various aspects of their life, to take an active approach to their health, and to integrate strategies that reduce their risk for a variety of college student health issues. Before I introduce our presenters this evening, I just want to mention a few things. First, we absolutely encourage you to ask questions, and if you're not familiar with this program, there is a question box on your GoToWebinar dashboard that you can use to type in questions to any of us, and we will do our best to answer them in the context of the presentation, but we can't guarantee that we will get to every question that you submit during the live presentation this evening. But if we don't, we'll certainly get in touch with you at the webinar conclusion with an answer to your question. So joining me this evening are a number of campus experts, and I'm very excited to have several of them on board with us tonight. So I'm going to give them each some time to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about who they are at Villanova, and then we'll jump right into our discussion.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Burns. I am the Associate Vice President for Student Life at Villanova, and I have many hats on campus. And one of the things that I do is I work with our Gay Straight Coalition, which is a student and campus organization that includes students, faculty, and staff, where we try to increase the welcomingness, if you will, environment on campus for our LGBT students, and try to make sure that students have that do not encounter homophobic kind of behaviors and address those kinds of behaviors when they do happen.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
Hi, I'm Julia Arduini. I am a senior this year, a communication major and gender women's studies major from Fairfield, Connecticut. I am one of the steering committee members of the Gay Straight Coalition, and I am also a co-leader of OASIS.
Thanks, Julia.
Hi, I'm John Immervar. I'm a professor in the Department of Philosophy, and I teach philosophy courses, but I'm also very involved in our Augustine and Culture seminar. And I'm really here for 2 reasons. So first of all, as a faculty member, I these days only teach freshmen. I see a lot of students and have, I think, a familiarity with student issues. But I'm also the proud parent of a gay son. He's now a little older than a college student, but you know, I've been sharing his experience, and I can share a little of my experience as a parent of a gay student as well.
Thank you, John.
Hello, I'm Father Joe Calderon. I'm one of the Augustinian friars here on campus. I work primarily at the law school as the chaplain and the counselor there. I'm also moderator of a group called OASIS, which we'll hear about soon.
Okay, so
we wanted to talk a little bit about, between Kathy and Father Joe, talk a little bit about our Villanova philosophy and our approach to GLBTQ issues. And so we want to start just by sharing a little bit about that before we jump right into our discussion this evening.
Okay. One of the Augustinian charisms or values that we hold highly is the idea of community and respect, friendship. St. Augustine's philosophy of education was that he believed that each person had already been endowed with many insights and talents and abilities, and through the teaching and learning process that is welcomed out of each person in the context of relationships. especially among friends and people that care and respect one another.
And some of the things that we try and do on campus, as the slide suggests, is really to try and create a very respectful and supportive environment on campus for all of our students, which includes our gay and lesbian students. And part of that, especially I think at a Catholic school, is kind of letting people know it's a topic that it's okay to talk about. I think some people come to school and aren't sure if it's okay to be in or out, if they themselves are gay or lesbian, but also maybe other students have not been knowingly interacting with or exposed to students who are from the LGBTQ community. So a lot of times it's helping foster just some conversation, discussion, so that people understand one another and that people can feel accepted and feel that assumptions aren't being made about who each of us is, but that each individual is respected for who they are and for how God made them.
Great. And now Kathy's going to set the agenda for us this evening in terms of what we're going to be talking about and going through together this evening.
Okay, so with the good advice and wisdom of Father Joe, Dr. Immervar, and Julia, we'll be discussing what it's like to come out, both from the student experience as well as from the parent perspective. We'll also be talking about what the experience is of a student who is gay at Villanova and some of the different components really of that student experience that are involved. And then also we do have some campus organizations and campus resources that in some way are related to sexual orientation, and so we'll also be talking about those with you as well tonight.
Great. So to get us started, Dr. John Immervar is going to break it down for us in case those of you listening in this evening aren't sure what all this alphabet soup is that we've been referring to.
So you hear this expression LGBTQ, and it's sort of mysterious what it is. But as you can see from the screen, it stands for a whole bunch of different experiences that we see in young people generally, and certainly, well, all populations, certainly in our students. So lesbian, obviously, is a female individual whose primary focus is attraction to members of the same sex. Gay, while can be a more generic expression, more often refers to a male individual whose primary focus is same sex. Bisexual, individuals who can really connect with both sexes. Transgendered is a term used to describe individuals whose gender identity doesn't conform to the stereotypes of either masculine or feminine norms. And questioning is really, we see a lot of among the younger student population, is people who are just not sure about their sexual identity and questioning it. And, you know, one of the things that's been so clear to me, both from my own experience as a parent but also seeing our students, is how difficult it is in our society to be a gay student or a gay individual. And, you know, I just was talking to someone about the work of a theologian called James Arison, and he gave such a simple example, and I'll just share it with you for a moment. He said, if you look at our society, maybe 10% of people are left-handed and 90% of people are right-handed. And we live kind of in a right-handed world. We write right to left, and the desks are for right-handers, and the scissors and a million things are set up for right-handers. And if you're a lefty, it's kind of difficult. Of course, in the old days, they used to punish people for being left-handed. But imagine what society would be like for left-handers if everybody said, well, why did you decide to be a left-hander? What's wrong with you? Or if you had to hide being left-handed and do everything with your right hand. Or people who knew you were left-handed thought there was something wrong with you. Or if you were seen eating with your left hand, people would beat you up. And that gives you a little bit of a sense of what the experience can be for gay, lesbian people in our society. And so one of the things I use with my students in class is some of these examples you see. And I say, you know, as a straight student, you can be pretty sure your roommates, hallmates, and classmates will be comfortable with your sexual orientation. You can read the others. No one asks you why you're straight. When did you know you're straight? Speak for straight people. So I guess what this slide helps me understand is some of just the stress and strain and difficulties, both for gay, lesbians, students here, but also for us in understanding what their experience is, those of us who are straight.
Thank you. And so what we'd like to do is really set the tone for our discussion this evening and really paint the big picture of what it is like being gay on a high school campus, on a college campus, and then beyond. And so what we'd like to do is paint a little bit of a picture of what we do know about what it's like being gay and why it's not as simple as being a straight student. And so what we'd like to do is just talk you through and give you a moment to read some of these experiences and what some of the research is really telling us about what some of these consequences can be for students who are out. And then what I'd like to do is have Julia weigh in as we're talking through some of these about how these really play out in her real experiences maybe as a high school student, as a college student, and beyond. And so what I'd like to do is just have you take a look here about how there are very real effects on academic performance for our LGBTQ students, as you can see by this information here. But then there are also some very significant consequences when it comes to harassment, discrimination, which can contribute to some of those negative, not only experiences, but then negative perceptions of that student's community and how they see themselves as a part, or in some cases not as a part of that community. And so what I'd like to do is pause for a moment and have Julia sort of give us the real picture of how this research plays out into the real experience.
Well, I actually did not know or acknowledge my sexual orientation in high school. I always had a feeling or an inkling, but I never acted on it or thought that I was actually gay or I was actually lesbian. Once I came to college, it wasn't until I met my girlfriend at the time and that I knew I was gay. And the way freshman year, I was actually bullied by my roommate, and the way I was bullied was my girlfriend and I had kissed in the doorway of my dorm when we thought that my roommate was asleep, and she was not asleep, and she saw it, and she essentially rolled over and texted every single member of the freshman class that she knew, telling them what she had seen. And at this point, I was out to solely myself and my girlfriend. So you can imagine how difficult it was for countless number of my peers knowing my sexual orientation without me knowing who knew or who was looking down on me for it or any of that. Beyond that, my roommate did things like text me derogatory words about the LGBT community, and it was just a very bad environment, and I attributed a lot of it to me not fully accepting myself or being confident in myself, which is why I feel as some sort of a target for bullying. Not that I allowed it to happen, but that's it kind of made me a little bit more of a target. I actually ended up switching rooms halfway through the year, and I had told my RA it was just because we were fighting. I did not tell her the real reason, and at this point I was still afraid of my own sexuality, and I did not confide in any authority figures, especially because I was scared as a student at a Catholic university how it would be taken.
Thanks, Julia. Well, I think you can ascertain from listening to some of the facts and stats and then hearing Julia put a face on that intuitively we know that the more out college students on our campuses are more likely to have a positive experience and a positive perception of their campus. However, if we compile all of those negative experiences that we looked at in those stats and figures and hearing a little bit of Julia's story so far, if we compile all of those for our GLBTQ students and we look at campuses around the country, we can easily see why they report higher rates of alcohol use and abuse, and you can see some of the stats that are there on your screen. But additionally, they're experiencing some greater and more negative consequences, as we compare them to their heterosexual peers. And that could be for a number of reasons. It could be because of this experience of homophobia, whether it be their own internal homophobia, whether it be external, and some of the experiences that Julia has talked about that could be contributing to this increased alcohol use or abuse. But there are other issues that may come up. For example, as you see in the second bullet, some of these other factors that just may play into some of the experience from perceived experience discrimination all the way to hate crimes to just a failure or the student's perception that there's a failure of the community to accept or acknowledge their experience on campus. And so again, I'd like to pause and have Julia kind of weigh in on what that looks like for her.
While I have not personally had any issues with alcohol, I have seen some of my peers in the LGBT community have some issues with alcohol. For me personally, I have mainly seen this among the transgender community, and I believe that is because they have a lot more difficulties, because not only accepting, because their sexuality is different, but for sexuality you just have to accept your sexuality. For transgender, you are living in the wrong body. And if you could imagine, that would be very stressful, and one might think alcohol is a good outlet. The other thing that I've seen is alcoholic issues more with gay men, and I think that is probably because the gay man atmosphere is kind of more of a social atmosphere, and whereas for women, in my experience, it's more of a getting together and talking about your feelings as opposed to socializing. But that's all I can say to that.
Well, before we move forward, and we're actually going to move into an arena where we did have a question submitted in the registration process for this webinar that I'm hopeful the next step in our presentation will answer a little bit for you. But before we do that, did any of our other presenters want to weigh in on the alcohol piece and maybe how that's played out, or you're hearing that play out, in your roles on campus?
Well, alcohol is a very serious issue on campus in general, and the more stressed out a student is, the more that student is likely to turn to alcohol. So, you can imagine the enormous stress that some of their gay and lesbian students are under as they try and cope with these issues. So it's obvious, I think, that that's going to be a factor.
And I don't know, Julie, if you'd agree, but I think for students who are not out on campus, they may not be presenting with this additional challenge or struggle, but they may be presenting for alcohol-related issues or violations. And so sometimes conversations with other people on campus, they may not be readily linked to organizations like Gay Straight Coalition, may be a window into that conversation, and sometimes students may feel comfortable coming out to that person, or may still sort of keep that to themselves. So I don't know if that also
I would agree with that. I would say that it's a lot more difficult to be in the closet from what I've experienced, and that is where more depression lies, and that is where you experience a lot of internal struggling, and as mentioned before, that's where alcohol may come into the picture, and that's where you might use an outlet for coping.
I think another thing about alcohol, it's a transitional phase that people go through. Young people and their young adults are going through lots of changes in who they are and what they're all about, and they use different things that subconsciously or consciously they've been taught from society, from their family, from TV and everything, that it's more mature, more adult, as for instance smoke or to drink or to be a party person. Or so many things are happening at this phase in a young adult's life. Their identity is really coming up. Their individuation is happening a lot more concentratedly and more rapidly.
Great, and I know that's exactly where we're moving in the presentation. And again, I know we had a question come in from one of our parents listening in this evening about sexual identity, and so I would certainly encourage you, if you were that parent, or if you're one of the other parents listening in, if you have additional questions that we're not really covering as we're speaking, please do weigh in with your question. We'd be happy to elaborate. So I'm going to turn it back to Father Joe to talk more about that.
It seems one of the things that happens to us as human beings as we mature, we become more aware of the mystery of who we are. We discover things about ourselves based on the different events and conversations and relationships that we get into. That's also very true, like I said, of anybody and everybody. For a gay person, they're becoming more aware that maybe they're a little different from some of the majority of the people around them. they don't understand that because society is, again, saying you're supposed to be attracted to the opposite sex, but yet they have feelings or attractions or whatever to the same sex. Then they, as they get more comfortable understanding that those feelings are indeed there, they become a little more confident in that identity, and they might mention it to one or two or a few people. That would be called what the group calls coming out. And then there's probably a phase where you start to explore and get more serious in the relationships that you get into, and start feeling like what it's like to be in a one-on-one relationship with other like-minded and like-oriented people. That might lead to some feelings or attitudes of pride, a sense of identity of this is who I am. I'm glad I know who I am. I want to be more involved with people in my community. That's where the word pride is so often used in that dynamic or process of coming out. Usually that takes a few years, these steps that I'm talking about. It doesn't just all happen in a few days or a few weeks. Different relationships, some work out, some relationships don't work out. Again, just like all human beings go through. Then there's a time of possible integration where one might feel somewhat stable in a relationship for some time, and even talk about some things like partnering for long-term or for life commitment. Usually by the time someone gets to this, they're pretty well into their adulthood, and they're probably almost ready to begin the transition to midlife crisis. Okay, somebody would like to continue?
So let's talk a little bit about a phrase we've mentioned a couple times, which is the whole experience of coming out. And as you can see from what we said before and what you probably know in your own experience, the gay experience, from what I understand, is a particularly difficult one, because all of us, I think, struggle with coming to terms and understanding our own sexuality. But then, for the gay experience, there's that additional part of my sexuality isn't one that's widely accepted, and who do I tell and how do I tell? So we thought we'd talk just a little bit about that. And maybe, Julia, why don't you start, if you don't mind, talking about what you see among gay students or yourself of what the experience of coming out is like, and then I'll try and reflect a little bit on the parent experience.
For me, coming out is it's a situation that holds a lot of anxiety, and something that a lot of people struggle with, and it's something that takes a lot of thought. And I guess just from my experience, as I said before, in terms of my friends and my peers, I did not have to come out because my roommate did that for me. But beyond that, I did have my friends from home. I did have my family. And I decided to come out to my friends from home that first freshman year during winter break. And I was very scared. I was terrified. I spent an entire week with them, feeling them out, looking for clues, seeing which friend would be the best one to tell first. And then I ended up telling one, and she kind of helped me tell the rest. And for some reason, coming out to friends and peers is not nearly as scary as coming out to family, because there is no threat of being disowned or being not welcomed by your own family, which sounds terrifying. So I ended up telling my mother the summer after freshman year, and it was the scariest thing I've ever done. I sat her down in a room, and she actually had already known from my sister, who found out. So I haven't actually had to come out to anyone at this point yet, really. In terms, I'm just kidding. But essentially, like, I told my mother, and she tried to be very accepting. She definitely did the very motherly thing of saying, "Are you sure? I don't want your life to be harder. Please think about this. Like, have you considered seeing if you like men?" Like, and obviously I said that's not necessary. But she definitely took it fairly well. And then she actually told my father, so I did not tell him. But one story that is a crowd favorite that I always like to use as a sign of hope is me coming out to my grandmother. So I get a call. I'm a senior now. This is junior year. I get a call from my mother frantically saying, "Where are you? Like, go home right now and call me back." So, of course, I think somebody died, like something really awful is happening. Like, so I run back to my room and I call her, and she was very frantic, saying, "What are you doing on Facebook? Somebody told Grandma that you're gay because of Facebook or something." And I was like, whoa, like how in the, Grandma is old, how does she have Facebook? But apparently somebody else told her that has Facebook. And my mother told me that my grandmother spent the entire morning crying and she can't stop crying, and this was very, very hard for her. So I said to my mother that I know my grandmother is fairly old and going through a lot, and I didn't want to add any stress to her life. Especially because I'm so young and everything. So I offered to my mother for me to call my grandmother and just tell her it wasn't true and kind of reassure her so that this stress was just eliminated from our lives. And my mother was like, "If you don't mind, I think that might be a good idea." So I called my grandmother and we started talking about the weather, of course, when we first talked. And then I said, "Grandma, I heard you're upset." Mind you, she's a big old Italian lady with a strong accent. And she goes, "Yeah, ma said, nobody told me." And I said, "Nobody told you what, Grandma?" And she goes, "That you're gay." And I was like, "Well, Grandma, like, even if like, I said, Grandma, you don't believe everything everybody says. Like, it's not, you don't know if it's true." And she goes, "No, Julia, if it's true, it's okay. If you're gay, it's okay." And then I said to her, "Grandmother, I heard you were crying all morning. Like, why were you crying if you think it's okay?" And she goes, "Yeah, I'm crying because nobody told me." So she felt left out that nobody told her. And I was like, I kept saying, "Well, I mean, it's not something to cry over that nobody told you. Like, clearly there's more reason why you were crying." And then she started opening up, saying, she was like, "Yeah, at first I was upset because I think of the family and I think of the husband and the wife and the children and the family, and then I watched the opera, and on the opera there's the man and the children and the woman, and they're born that way." So of course at this point I start crying, and I'm so happy that my grandmother was accepting. And I was very proud of Oprah for being the outlet for that. And then she continued to say, she's thinking back to my childhood, and she was like, "You know, I should have known. We go to the store, and you always buy the baseball cap, and you never want the dress." So that's my example of faith in people, especially family members of an older tradition.
So I don't have quite as charming a story, but so you know, my son came out to me when I think he was a sophomore in high school, and he went to a very liberal school, and it's a very liberal family, and we have like lots of gay friends and all that. But I could still see how stressful it was for him, and the kind of nervousness that he felt about it, about coming out. So I could see from his side how difficult a choice it was for him, and I'm sort of proud he was able to come to terms with himself and make that come out to me at such a young age. I think that saved him a lot of grief and agony, as you know, for the next couple of years. But I think from the parents' perspective, you can see that this is not every bit, but certainly has many difficulties. And of course, who you feel most for, the parents that have moral objections to the sexuality of their children and have expressed those for a long time. And there I can't imagine what it's like for a kid to build up the courage to come out, or what that family goes through after that, but I know it's very painful and difficult. But let's just talk about a parent like myself, whose other people's children want to be gay. That's just fine, no problem. But what is it for me? And of course, I think the first thing the parent thinks is, what a difficult life this might be for my child, or how much easier it would be if the child weren't gay. So, and that's a painful experience. And then, of course, every parent thinks, well, what about the grandchildren? That's not the gay. Kids don't have children and grandchildren for the parent, but it's certainly a factor that comes up. And then, interestingly, there's the coming out of the parent. So when you have children, every time you turn around, people say, oh, does your son have a girlfriend? Is your son getting married? Is your son this? Is your son that? And each time you have to go through, do I want to go through this here with these people, or how do I want to deal with this, or yes, no. So it's not an easy thing for a lot of parents. So let's move ahead maybe and talk about this whole question of what can be helpful for parents. And Julia, can you reflect on sort of what made it easier for you, perhaps?
Yeah, actually, I think I mentioned this before, but something that I always looked for was cues as to who would be more accepting when I come out to them. And the way I did that was I listened to the language that they used, and I picked up on things like that. And I'll share a quick story about the first time that I heard inclusive language, and I was just so overjoyed by it. This was right after my freshman year, during the summer. I was with a couple friends, and one girl said to another girl, who I assumed all of these girls were straight, and one girl said to the other girl, oh, hey, like, we need to get you a boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever you want, like, let's find you somebody. And these two girls, like, I would assume that everybody's straight here, and she just had this inclusive language, and I automatically said to myself, like, wow, this is somebody that's totally going to be cool with it, and, like, this is somebody that I can tell. And immediately, like, I just felt so comfortable around this girl solely because of adding one word to a sentence. And in terms of ways parents can be more inclusive, is to maybe try and, as it says, consider your assumptions. One thing that I always used to hate is my mother always, I don't know if this was her way of getting me to tell her that I was gay, but she would always say, Julia, like, oh, isn't that boy cute on TV? Like, oh, look, it's Prince Williams. Like, would you marry him? And I would, of course, say, Mother, that's completely impossible because I don't live in London. But little things like that, like maybe if she had said something like that first girl, I would have been a lot more willing to tell her.
And this is Kathy. Something I would share that a few years ago we had a Villanova alum come back to campus, and he had made a documentary about a Christian camp for gay teens. And so he showed the documentary, and then he spoke. And somebody, one of the students in the audience, said to him, you know, I recently came out to my parents, and my parents have not been very accepting, and it's been very, very painful for me. And so the young man was asking this, you know, 30-something alum for tips and advice. And what the alum said I thought was quite profound, really, because he said that it had taken himself years to come to terms with his sexual identity, as we were talking about before. And it was a journey, as Father Joe indicated, that sometimes takes years to figure out, who am I, how am I different, what does this mean for me? And that sometimes, as a parent, you go through a very similar kind of journey. And that, I guess what I want to say is be patient with yourself, but in the meanwhile, you know, try not to alienate the child as you're struggling with whatever that journey is for you. And at the end of the day, you know, a parent's love, I think, is going to win out, and a child's love is going to win out. At least that's what we hope for. I think that's what God calls us to, is to love one another. But that it's okay for it to take a little while, and to do some of that work and some of that journeying, just like the individual had to do in terms of accepting who they are and what that means for them.
And I'd say two other things, and the first is to echo what Julia said of, you know, there are so many assumptions in the way we speak. I've found just with adults that I meet, if I say to somebody, oh, do you have a family, do you have a wife, do you have a husband, or you're married, what's your husband do? You know, I'll get, from some people, I'm not married. So, but if you say to somebody, And do you have a partner? Just that little choice of words can be a signal to somebody to say, yes, I do, and mention somebody of the same sex. So as Kathy and I were saying, it's one thing to say, do you have a boyfriend? And another thing is there someone special in your life? And just a little signal like that lets people come out to you and lets people be more trusting because it suggests that you're not necessarily assuming. And the second thing sort of follows from what Kathy said also is, you know, when you're a parent, one of the things I hope I learned anyway, is you can't always tell your kids everything you're feeling about what they're doing. And so if they're telling you something that's difficult for you, you can let them know it's difficult, but maybe the processing of that difficulty is going to happen with your friends and somebody else, not with the kid. You're not necessarily their buddy. They're looking for you to be accepting and supporting, not to be their therapist while you work out your issues. So be honest and process your feelings, as it says, but you don't necessarily have to process them all with your son or daughter.
And we did have a question come in from one of our parents as Julia and Kathy and John were speaking, and that is about how would a parent know if their student is sort of struggling with this, particularly while they're in college, and they might have a great physical distance or even be a mile away, but how do they know?
Well, just to start with the simplest thing, if you indicate some acceptance in the way you talk about other people who are gay and the kinds of questions you ask, then the way you'll know is your student will tell you. So that's the best way. You don't have to be, Harriet the Spy and figure it out. You just have to be open and let that person tell you. But I'm sure there are other things.
Yeah, just from my perspective, my first whole year, but specifically the first semester freshman year when I was in that difficult situation with my roommate, I didn't necessarily express anything to my mother, but I think she could tell that I was going through a hard time, and I don't know if she thought maybe I was just having a difficult time adjusting to college, or if she thought something bigger was happening. But my advice would be pick up on those little things and maybe inquire more about it and ask your children.
All right, so we're going to shift over into sort of the Villanova experience and talk a little bit about our community.
Yes, thanks, Stacy. This is Kathy again. We really, as I said at the outset, do try and create a respectful and welcoming environment for all of our students and to have a community that is accepting of everyone. And I think all of our policies, of course, are consistent with that. We also do have a couple different programs. We've mentioned the Gay Straight Coalition, which is an organization really for everybody and anybody, and we have as many straight, if not more straight, people involved with the organization who are allies, who are supportive. They might have a friend, a roommate, a family member who's gay, or they might just feel passionately that people should be treated well. And so they're involved, and then obviously a lot of students from our LGBT community are also involved. And we both have meetings where we might talk about issues that are in the news or in the media related to sexual orientation. Sometimes we might host a panel or a speaker or a film that, again, gets to these issues about sexual orientation, just to really raise awareness. Sometimes it isn't until college that people who are straight really start to think about, oh, what would it be like to be gay? And am I being inclusive? And am I being welcoming? And so we try and create those opportunities for those conversations. We also have a safe space program, which many schools, high school, colleges have. We call it Safe Zone. And we have about 350 people on campus who are trained as Safe Zone volunteers. And they have a little logo. And really those people are just making the statement of, we respect others. We are not interested in intolerant kind of behaviors, actions, language. And this is a safe space if somebody wants to come talk about anything that has happened. Or even, I think as happens more often, is people know that that's a safe person. So maybe somebody's more likely to come out to that Safe Zone volunteer. And then, of course, we have, counseling services that are available for all our students. But sometimes students who are questioning sexual identity, it's a very loaded question, as you can imagine. And so some students, just like if their parents are going through a divorce or they're having a breakup with a boyfriend or girlfriend, figuring out who you are as a human being or as a sexual being all those things are the kinds of things that people go to counseling for on campus. And we really do try and encourage all community members to partake in these things so that people can have greater acceptance of everyone.
There's also OASIS, which is a group for our students that are gay but haven't felt comfortable being real public about that.
Or questioning.
They're questioning, and they come to the OASIS group. And this is compatible certainly with the Catholic Church teaching to be respectful and compassionate and educational to all people. So it gives people the opportunity to explore how their sexuality and their spirituality might come together. So everything that we've talked about tonight and more are the kinds of things that are discussed with the young people that come to this group called OASIS.
Yeah, and this next slide of some of the things in the news, and it's really why we have the Gay Straight Coalition, why we have OASIS. The world is different than it was 20 years ago when people didn't talk about things. And today we want people to be who they truly are, and sometimes the road of being LGBT is harder, as we've alluded to, and some of these news stories kind of indicate that, and yet there's opportunities for celebration too. Will Sheridan is an alum. He was a starter on the men's basketball team, and he came out last year on ESPN. For those of you in the Philadelphia area, there was recently a flap where another university's alumni organization for Valentine's Day had a, write-in to be the best, couple from this institution. And 2 lesbians had entered, and they were not allowed to enter. It was another Catholic university, and there was a big flap about it. And at the end of the day, people kind of thought, well, if these people have a positive, consensual, loving relationship, that they can be the Valentine's couple of the year. And then, as it turned out, they were voted the winners of the contest. And so I think Villanova and our students at Villanova are part of this culture where we are trying to find ways to celebrate our sexual identity and our sexual orientation, and most importantly, to make sure that bullying and hateful things do not happen on our campus.
I think stories like these and the next initiative that Julia is going to talk about are great opportunities also for you as parents and guardians to initiate conversation about things that might be happening. It might be a way into the conversation if you're struggling to find that way in. And I think this is also a fabulous opportunity for you as parents and guardians of a Villanova student.
Well, the It Gets Better campaign is a campaign that was started after the in the media there was a slew of suicides being shown in the media over a year ago in October, and a lot of people were very upset by this, and they were all done by LGBT youth, and including Tyler Clementi. So this one man initiated the It Gets Better project, which is a website where anybody can upload videos just saying, telling teens, LGBT teens, it does get better, and you should hang in there, and life does not end today, nor will it tomorrow. So I saw this campaign, and I was very intrigued by it, and I felt compelled to do something. And I thought, what better than to have a Catholic university make an It Gets Better video. So I brought the idea to the rest of the steering committee, and they said, of course, we'll support you in this. So I found some people that knew how to work a video camera and pulled this together. And I have to say, I was extremely shocked by the amount of support that we got from the entire campus. We don't have time to show the video now at all. It's 24 minutes if you ever have time. I highly encourage you to watch it. But you'll see in the final clip, there was hundreds of Villanovans that came out on the day that we did the final shot, and just to support. They all lined up across the center of campus, and it's really beautiful to see that many people come out of all different backgrounds.
And what was really impressive about that thing Julia just said is they came out on a Sunday morning in January when it was 18 degrees outside.
The coldest day of the year.
It ended up being one of the coldest days of the winter, last winter, obviously not this winter. But and and because of the filming, we were out there for quite a while, and nobody complained, and everyone's spirit was so high because it was a group, many students we'd never seen before having anything to do with any of our other programs, and it was the community saying bullying is not okay, and we want to take a stand against that kind of behavior.
Great, thank you both, and we definitely encourage you to click on this link and watch that at your leisure. We're going to wrap up our last couple minutes here just going over some community and campus resources so that you can utilize these beyond our discussion this evening. So John is going to talk a little bit about PFLAG.
Right, and so here's a great resource for parents, and as I said, you might not always want to process your issues with your son or daughter, and so there's the rest of the world, and it's like anything else. As soon as you start looking around, you find lots of other people you know whose son or daughter is gay or lesbian. So reach out, and here's a great place to get started.
And we've all sort of been alluding to a number of these organizations. I think we've talked a little bit about GSC. We talked a little bit about Oasis and Safe Zone. The one that we haven't mentioned, Father Joe, if you just want to say just a few words about what Outlaw is.
Outlaw is the name of the group at the law school, and they bring together educational opportunities that connect with the law and issues of LBGT. And recently, the law school was able to just put a course into its curriculum. It's LBGT issues in the law, since so many different aspects of the law are being utilized today, not just marriage, but also adoption, property, contracts, and so many other things. So that's a good movement that we see happening. But Outlaw is also a national organization. Other law schools have chapters as well. So Villanova is a part of that as well.
And then we've just included some additional resources and services, some on our campus, some in the community. We've talked a little bit about all the different GSC-related resources, so that first website there is sort of your first place to start to link to all of those things. And then Kathy has talked a little bit about our Holloway Counseling Center. And just as a reminder, those are free, confidential services to our students, and really the majority of our students step foot into the Counseling Center at one point or another in their time at Villanova, and it could be for very common experiences from homesickness to transitioning to students who are struggling with many of the issues and challenges we've talked about this evening.
And Stacy, wouldn't you say that parents can also call the Counseling Center if they have questions and want some information?
I would absolutely encourage you to pick up the phone and call someone in the Counseling Center. There are some limitations in terms of what conversations you can have about your students' conversations in the Counseling Center, but you are always welcome to consult and speak with one of our psychologists in the Counseling Center here at Villanova. Thank you for that. And then also just a couple of community resources that we as a group wanted to also share with you. You have the Human Rights Campaign and the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. Great websites just for information, resource, and guidance for parents on both of those sites as well. And then we have two others. We didn't have really the space on the slide to include, but we wanted to give Father Joe a moment to talk about New Ways Ministry and Dignity as well.
Yeah, both of these organizations come out of a Catholic tradition. They're not officially within the structure of the Catholic Church, but the people that founded it and work in them and participate with them are professional people that think of ways and means to further the discussion of integration of LBGT issues and church teaching.
Great. Thank you to everyone who's on the call this evening. And again, thank you for your patience with some of our technical issues in the beginning. Thank you also to all of our presenters who are here this evening. And we purposely included our email contact information so that if you do have questions after this evening and you wanted to reach out to any one of us, I know we're more than happy to respond. But I'd also like to thank, again, all of you for being here this evening. And this does conclude our 5th Influencer Series session on sexual identity. Within the next several weeks, this presentation recording will be available on our Influencer Series website, which is listed here on your slide. Our next and final Influencer Series session for the 2011-2012 academic year will take place on May 1st from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and focuses on prescription drug use and abuse. We hope you will join us again, and until then, we hope you have a happy and healthy evening.